everybody. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. We're digging into the digital revolution and the incredible impact it is having on our lives. And heck, now we've even got the Metaverse coming in here to make things even more interesting. But back here on planet Earth, it's people who make the world go round. It's talent that is driving the digital economy and the acceleration economy. And we're delighted to have one of our favorite monthly digital all-stars, Pat Fitzgerald, who's the co-founder of CareerAv, a placement firm that he and a partner started several years ago. Pat has had a great career in the talent and recruiting industry, and he's got some great insights. Pat, always a pleasure to have you.
Great to be here again, Bob. Thank you for the invite.
Pat, so it's you and I, anybody seeing us could tell this is not our first year or decade in the business. But you say you have never seen anything like what's going on now. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's exciting, but also dangerous at the same time. There's got to be I think there's got to be an awful lot of forethought about what the ramifications are going to be in so many of the areas around talent attraction and whether it be compensation or virtual workspace. There's just so many impact issues that I think a lot of companies haven't necessarily thought about, but are making these decisions that will evolve, but don't necessarily see the results that are going to be the long term. So love to be able to get into some of that today.
Yeah, Pat, well, go ahead, because I do think it's fascinating. You as at careerav.com there, you see things from the companies that want to do the hiring, their ideas, their hopes, their dreams, their expectations, but you also see the reality on the ground of the talent itself and what people are saying, what it was like today versus 6 months ago or 12 months ago. And so you please, lead the way here, because you've got this unique insight into all parts of this jumbled up world right now.
Yep. I appreciate that, Bob. Thank you. So I'm going to be a little cluttered today because there's just so many different topics that I really want to kind of run through. Basically, as we all know, the market's just exploded. Everyone needs talent. And I follow a lot of economists. You and I talked about that. Some of the statistics that I've been reading lately has really kind of intrigued me. As an example, we're boomers, and our boomer generation is the largest generation in the world history. Each generation that has followed has had less and less births, less and less. So as we look into the marketplace, we're just recognizing the reality that particularly the new generation, brighter, smarter, faster than we ever were, but they're smaller. There's less of them. So when we start to look at what talent is going to look like as it evolves, especially coming out of COVID, that 2 years has really changed so many dynamics in the talent war. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that too. But I think the big piece is that there's such a demand on talent. We came effectively bounced out of COVID late last year, and everyone naturally needed to get back into the marketplace and hire. The whole virtual workspace challenge gives them a real new challenge, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that. But reality is our clients today are now recognizing that their talent attraction, talent TA team has to be a true mix. And I want to double down on that conversation that I've had before, where it's got to be a mix of old school networks, personalities, and new school technologies. Excuse me. But my clients right now are also asking us to provide sourcing engines behind their talent teams, which is great. So we're providing sourcing engines that are providing particularly raw talent across multiple divisions, engineering, sales, customer success, and with a heavy focus on DE&I. Obviously, everyone needs to focus on DE&I. So those sourcing engines are really paying off. We find, Mark and I, my partner, that many times our clients, as great as they are, we overwhelm them. We really do give them a tremendous amount of talent and how they want to, do they want us to go out and attract them, or do they want to do it themselves? It's all within the program. But there's a huge rise in that end of it, where we're building pipelines to really build into those customers. The big piece right now in my mind is, particularly at the executive level where I certainly work, we're finding that there is always a focus of DE&I. Should have always been. A lot of companies are late to that game. They're trying to do it from the top down. That's a huge challenge. There's only so many, truly talented, capable people within the various industries. There's an awful lot of talented individuals within the DE&I space. It's just they're industry specific, and how do you really capitalize on it? And my challenge is, what I've tried to advise my clients is, many of these mid-tier or pre-IPO clients want to bring in a DE&I CRO, and I tell them, you're in a hugely competitive marketplace, and because of that, they're expensive. They may be more expensive. And what I try to encourage my clients to think about is, if they want to chase that, which they certainly should if they can, they have to look at the ramification of how they're going to skew their comp ranges going into the end of this year. I don't know, and I'm not an economist, but I do believe that certainly we're coming out of January 1st, really booming. But I think the first 2 quarters of this year are going to continue to be really strong. But again, I don't know. I read The Economist, and I realize that inflation is going to have an impact on the industry. How bad? We don't know. But reality is the second half might be a little different time when it comes to that sort of attraction. But these clients have to recognize that if they're going to overpay, how do they really, scale that for what their future is going to be within the internal equity? But I don't think a lot of companies are certainly looking at that. We're finding that the other piece that I think is really a challenge is, how do you attract them? And this is where I want to double down. If you're out in the marketplace and you're looking for early talent, mid talent, or executive, you still have to have, in my opinion, a stronger opinion today than ever before, a strong mix of talent attraction professionals that are old school, personal networks, relationship recruiters that are strong in their dominant domain space. They bring market intelligence, competitive intelligence, and the strong mix of new technology. There's so much. We look at AI now, the analytics, Toby's session last time on talent intelligence. There is so much at our disposal, excuse me, that the good recruiters need to be able to balance it. But I find that a lot of companies aren't configuring properly. They're not providing support teams to provide the right mechanisms to the talented recruiters. But I still believe, again, doubling down, that a mix of old school and new school is essential for this year.
Pat, I want to come back and be sure to talk to you a little bit more about that mix of the old and new, but also, Pat, I also want to come back to you and ask you about that notion of, hey, if you want certain types of candidates, you can pay for them. But as with everything, there's a cost. If you do this and you push all your money over here, then you're not going to be able to do that and that. So just a couple of those sort of what if scenarios, but I'll come back to you in a second. I just want to offer this message from our sponsor, BMC. We all know that what the A game is, right? Among athletes, it's the highest level of performance, and you can get to that level in business as well. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. It's when technology and people work in harmony, and that's how business reaches its A game. You can find out more at bmc.com/A game. So, Pat, would you take a second more on each of those pieces, right? That your mix of old school and new, and then also you see it like in the C-suite over the past year, 2 years, they've had to reassess, maybe reimagine and redevelop how they do product development, sales, marketing, everything up and down the list. And now it seems to be hitting what you're saying in the whole field of talent. They've got to rethink their approaches to what's going on here. So could you just go a little deeper on each of those, Pat?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the executive level, I've always encouraged our clients to be proactive, forward thinking. And when a client completes the hiring of all their open executive positions, it doesn't mean that they stop sourcing and interviewing and frankly, meeting the marketplace. I'm a firm believer, and I've always been around market and competitive intelligence. Get to know who your competition is, little dynamics. One of the things we used to do all the time was we would sit with the RVPs of sales and say to them, if you've got a competitive account rep beating you in a deal, call my recruiter that's on your team and give them that name so we can go recruit them, disrupt them, but recruit them at the same time. So be proactive. These RVPs, because they're very focused on meeting the demand in the deal, they say, well, I don't have an account rep opening. That's incidental to the activity of exploratories and meeting them. You might like this person and you might have someone on the bubble. That's up to you. We're not forcing it, but it's important to also sit with them and recognize, the various personalities and the approaches of sales within the competitive marketplace. And we take that to a different level at the executive level. And Bill was great at it. Rob was great at it. Many of the key executives, Tom Siebel, when I worked there, certainly did this very well, which is, even after we filled all the openings, we would still go into the marketplace and we would try to attract top talent, executive level, particularly way back then, focused on, diversity.
Yeah.
And we would be bringing those people through and making interviews, exploratories with the key executives. In many cases, at SAP, we hired 20+% of our executives through those exploratories, because the leadership under Bill would recognize that we should create a role and evolve it, because we know that next year this whole industry is going to explode. So let's prepare now. So yeah, maybe we spend a little extra money half a year because we're bringing them in on a high comp, but reality is we're building into the culture and into the scale dynamics, and it worked extremely well. That is something that very few companies today do. Okay. So I hope that gives you what you were thinking.
Absolutely, Pat. And I'm sorry I'd interrupted you before you went on your next point, but I just think that's so vital today, as every company has to think in new and different ways about every part of its business. But for some reason, in some C-suites, that fresh approach to thinking stops as it hits either HR or the talent area in particular, when in fact that ought to be one of the top priorities working through. So that was very helpful.
Yep. And it's also fun, because when you have great leadership, which obviously most companies aspire to, they want to get out into the market and they want to meet the other players within the marketplace. And I just think it really changes the way we all look at competition, and it gives all of our leaders, all I can do is facilitate it. I'm not the hiring authority. I just want to be able to drive programs that will allow our leaders to be forward thinking and to be inspirational leaders when it comes to the marketplace and competitive, the competitive nature. And then when you take it down to the individual contributor, and this is where I really worry a little bit today, particularly in the early talent and the early career, early talent. We are now looking at a complete change in the way we see cultures of companies through the virtual workspace. Mm-hmm. It's here to stay. Like whatever those percentages are today will evolve. I firmly believe they'll evolve up and down. That's not up to me, and it's certainly not even up to the economists to be able to anticipate, but it is going to evolve. But virtual workspace is a reality. And what I don't think a lot of companies are thinking about is how does that affect their culture, their tenure, and their advancement and training of all of the new talent. I just don't think, I know there's an awful lot of learning and development, and some of the, the L&D leaders that I know very well are brilliant. They're hugely talented, but I think as a company, they don't have a holistic view of exactly what they have to do. And I'll give you one example. I worry about the advancement of the early talent. We are old school, Bob, you and me. We grew up where our examples of work ethic was hands-on. We saw it. We were in the work office, we were in the workspace. We had individual examples. A few of us had mentors, but many of us really learned our work ethic through the coworkers around us. In the virtual workspace, the early talent doesn't have that. So what are the companies doing around mentors, around individual training, around culture dynamics that are really, again, examples of, how and again, I don't care what generation it is, it's all generations in the past of how we prepare them to frankly take on the leadership roles of the future. And I think that's a huge challenge in today's world. I'll give you one example that I think is really important, but I don't think many companies are thinking about it. One of the economists that I read lately about the boomer generation being the largest and the new generation, the dynamic of the spending of the new generations is really impacted because they're all coming out of college with these massive, college debt.
Yeah.
So if you think about this, I don't know if this is possible, but the federal government allows for companies, particularly major corporations that are large or even mid-tier, that want to hire early talent. And then instead of giving them equity or giving maybe in a balance of equity or MBO bonuses, the company takes on paying off their college debt. Does the federal government allow that company to get a tax credit because of it? Should we be encouraging the companies? There's got to be a lot of creative ways to minimize, that university debt that these young generations are certainly burdened under, because it's affecting the way that they spend. It's also affecting the way that they learn and grow. So I don't know. There's creative ways that I think, we as a country and as an industry certainly can look a little differently at the way they treat bringing the culture and the scale of leadership up on a much more precise and frankly predictable way.
That's such a great point about the that what you called in some cases the culture dynamics, because 100 years ago when I started working, there weren't formal training programs, but the training program was, you go in there, you're with people every day, you can see them, you interact with them, and you sort of model it that way. You find a mentor, something like that. But how do you do that, as you pointed out, in the virtual world? So the imperative for this type of training and awareness, the mentorship thing, to make it more formal. Pat, what would you say in your experience, how many companies are doing that or doing it well? What is that, a quarter of companies? Or
I don't even think a quarter of the companies are doing it well, Bob. I think again, everyone's thinking about it and everyone's starting to do it. The good thing is that a lot of the tech companies where you and I work, already have a strong L&D organization. But the L&D organization certainly ends up being overly burdened with such a broad array. So I don't know, if they're actually realizing, as quickly as they should. I suspect some of them already have, but I just don't think the percentage is big enough where these companies are realizing, the potential of value. So you have companies that are really well led and well managed, so their leaders set the example. We all learned, like you said earlier, you and I learned from our coworkers and our managers from the good and the bad. Mm-hmm. But in today's virtual workspace, they don't see that. They see it on a video conference, and that's really not day to day. That's not moment to moment. And that's exactly where, we really changed our values as we matured into the professionals, hopefully that we are today.
Yeah. And Pat, in the opener for this episode, I mentioned the whole thing about the metaverse, and, there's a million different definitions of what it is and what it means and what's going on there. But clearly, in the largest sense, I guess it's going to change so much of what goes on here. But I know, there's one of the things that the Microsoft CEO talked about recently is he said, just think about meetings. He said daily meetings. He said how much more interesting, or a term used a lot, immersive could mm-hmm. be. And I think about that sometimes. There's one person who can't make it to this very important, 6, 8, 10 person conversation. So you get them on a video call, and they're, back here, and everybody else is a long table, and you can see the back of a couple heads. And the other people seem like they're in a different state, and they forget that person's on a video call. But just little things like that, so much is going to change so quickly. And then how you engage going outwardly with customers. How do you train people to do that in a way that blends the new school, old school approach exactly. That you alluded to earlier?
Yeah. And
How
then
do
culture, to your point, Bob, culture becomes unpredictable. A lot of companies that you and I have worked with and worked for have had a culture that they wanted to build, a specific culture. Well, today, I don't know how you do that as well as you used to. And I'm not saying, that people have to go back to the office. That's not my point. My
Right.
point is I don't know if it's as predictable as it used to be. So
Mhm.
therefore, there has to be some formulation and programs that actually create the opportunity for, every new hire to have a mentor.
Mhm.
But the dilemma with that is you and I learned, as we all did, from not that mentor talking to us, but just sitting in an office watching our coworkers succeed and fail and, struggle and how they work through, that's where we all learned. We didn't, we all, for those of us that might have had a mentor in our lifetime, have been fortunate enough to have that, certainly we learned a tremendous amount from that individual. If we had more than one, good for us. But I just think that they have to think about the way that this virtual workspace is really going to affect the new talent. And I think that goes back to the other topic that I mentioned a moment ago, the tenure of these employees.
Yeah.
We're seeing a big change in how long particularly early talent and young talent stays at a company. I personally think that has to change. Again, I'll go back to my old school. I look at resumes and I look at individuals' careers. And what I want to see is that they stayed at one company for a period of time and got promotions.
Yep.
Within that company. So the company saw their value and they promoted them and advanced them because, they actually warranted it in the environment that they were in. Versus today, where most people get a promotion by moving from one company to another. And again, there's assets to it, but it isn't necessarily as predictable. So I think there's a dynamic that we all have to think about in the way we can create a better tenure that will allow for us to be able to advance talent to take over, the future leadership roles of tomorrow.
Well, Pat, those are, wonderful insights. That whole thing of like, you can sit back and sort of hope that your old way of doing things will suffice, but it's not going to. So you got to do something about it. Pat, as we wrap up, could I ask you, please, if you put yourself in the mind of the hiring company,
mm-hmm.
What's the thing that they need to understand more clearly about the people they're trying to hire?
Mm-hmm.
And then what is it that the people looking for new jobs need to understand more clearly about the hiring companies? Okay. What advice would you give to each group?
Yep. So I think the companies have to I personally think the companies have to do a better job of creating a seamless process of HR leadership, right? Chief people officer through every function within HR, leadership development, assessment, advancement, talent acquisition, recruiting operations, all of it, right? University recruiting. There has to be a more seamless approach. And I strongly believe there has to be a stronger connection with talent attraction, assessment, and learning and development. Connecting those three can change a lot of companies to the way that they see talent in the future. And I think that will have a huge impact on the way that they retain their talent long-term. The advice I want to give the candidate is today, I don't know this to be true, but I sense there's a focus on comp. And I understand that we all need to pay our bills. We need to. But as you're an early talent or a university graduate, you got to get some experience. You really have to get some experience. I will always strongly be an advocate of you as a candidate looking at the person that you're going to work for, their leadership above them, not at the early stage in your career. It isn't, are they advanceable? Are those people stuck? And can they, will they move so I can advance? That's mid-career. But this early career, it's, are they insightful?
Mhm.
Are they good managers? Will they be a person that will help me advance? Are they a good teacher? And those are the questions you've got to ask. You've got to really look at the leadership you're going to work for and recognize that they're going to teach you, they're going to train you, they're going to inspire you, They're going to value you. They're going to stand on you when when you screw up, which we all do. They're going to do the right things as a professional, and they're not going to be an autocratic manager that just wants the boxes filled. They are really someone that you can trust is going to help you advance. And to me, that's one of the most important things you should look at as you're looking at companies and teams that are making you an offer.
Yeah. Pat, great insights there. And Pat, before we go, just let everybody know, please, if somebody wants to talk to you from the corporate side, how do you put those teams across HR better together? If a candidate wants to speak with you or somebody wants to talk to you about, hey man, where did you get that shirt? And want some fashion advice, Pat, where could somebody reach you?
Thank you, Bob, for that. So my partner, Mark Hatfield, and I are co-founders of CareerAv.com. You can find us there. The phone numbers, my personal number is on the website, as is Mark's. We provide executive recruiting, contingent recruiting, and we also provide talent acquisition guidance and consulting, along with RPO, contract recruiter, to our clients. But we also want to give back. So as we open up more and more opportunities, Mark and I both do an awful lot of individual consulting and guiding young early talent that are going through the maze of what's the right career, how do I get into the right advancement. And so Mark and I take on several individuals on an annual basis to help them, frankly, start to think about the way that they build their career. And I got my shirt at TJ Maxx.
Of course. Well, Patrick, it was great as always. Thanks for the insights into this, incredibly important and fast changing. And boy, talk about strategic. And I still think it's so goofy. People say, yeah, HR is a back office function. I said, yeah, right. Pat, thanks. Always great.
Great to be with you, Bob. Thank you again for the time. I really do appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations. So thank you.
It's wonderful. And folks, thanks to all of you for being with us here at Cloud Wars Live. Hope 2022 is off to a great start. We'll see you again soon.